Hey guys, how's it going? You're listening to Vol. Today we've got something a little bit more fun, and that is a review of the tournament final for the 5 Interplanetario. So this is a YouTube video that Corvus Valley put out pretty recently. You may have watched it yourself already. If you haven't, you can click on the link in my video description if you just want to watch it by yourself. But hang out with me. We'll watch it together, and we'll talk about what we can learn from the game and the Spanish commentary. Of course, the subtitles are on. Not everything's spelt correctly. English is a second language. That's okay. So this was a game between an left player and a Onyx player, and they're playing Supremacy, and they're just in the middle of explaining the Supremacy scenario right now. I'm pretty sure that this took place before the current Season 10 that we're in at the moment, so they're using the previous rules of the Supremacy mission, not the actual current one. So we're having a look at the lists now. By the way, all of the lists in the tournament, I believe, are just limited insertion. So here's the left one. You've got Achilles. This is vanilla Achilles, by the way. Engineer Specialist, okay. The proxy with double SMGs. This is a killer hacker. He had, let's just pause it for a sec. So there were two Nagas there. One's a killer hacker, one's a mine layer, I believe. And then there's the Danavas with hacker device specialists. I'm not too sure which profile they took for that. I'm just going to go quickly look at the Danavas hackers. So it was either the assault hacking device with icebreaker or the maestro. I'm pretty sure it would have been the hacking device plus with maestro listed here. Myrmidon officer, chain of command for Achilles. Eudoros, probot, that's the baggage. Okay. Just going to quickly rewind that. So a couple of comments about this left player's army list. If you know that you're going into a tournament and you're going to have to be playing limited insertion, I feel like it makes more sense to play still Phalanx here, because if you're going with Achilles, you can still take the Inamatakos link team with, say, Phoenix or something like that. I get the feeling that he went with Achilles with just vanilla so that he could use the Nagas and that he could use the posthumans. But just going through a couple of his list choices, you've got Eudoros in there, who is a little bit weak when he isn't in a link team. Like, he's quite expensive. I really feel like that could have been something different. I don't think I would have taken Eudoros. I'm just having a look at him now. So he's just got his Mark 12, BS13, ODD, but he costs 40 points. He's a bit vulnerable to shock. You definitely get more out of him when he's in a link team for sure. They did mention the Proxy Mark 1 was an engineer. I don't know if that's a mistake or not, but I can't for the life of me understand why you wouldn't take the Doctor instead. They're the exact same points value, and you've essentially got like Achilles as your most important model in that list. And surely none of the bots really need the help of an engineer, right? Unless of course the engineer is just there because he's worried about Achilles being isolated or hacked, something like that. Yeah, I like the Nagas. I feel like one of the Nagas is a mine layer because they mentioned that later, and it's better to use a Naga as a specialist. Anyway, not a particularly big fan of this army list. Let's have a look at the combined army one. So, a basic Nexus hacker, fantastic. Kernel, fantastic. Like that. Sphinx, okay, limited insertion, great choice. Noctifer, very solid. Q-Drone, Dr. Worm, really good choices. Okay, we learn later in the game, when it says 4 well-equipped Unitron bat droids with 2 of them also being specialists, we know that 2 of them have to be the Fort Observer, because that's the only specialist you get, if I recall correctly. I seem to see the Plasma Sniper model there, so Plasma Sniper, fantastic. And the 4th Unitron, as we'll learn later in the bat rep, has a Spitfire, which tells me that he's not running the profile that has the K1 Combi Rifle and Deflector, which I think is really important for Kernel. So we'll talk about that a little bit more soon. Okay, so the left player wins the lieutenant role, chooses deployed tournament zone, and the Onyx player goes first. Let's just unpack that a little bit. So this is a scenario where scoring's done at the end of every game round. It's really advantageous to go second in this. So the guy that won the role didn't choose second turn, and the guy who had the opportunity to take second turn still didn't take it. That speaks to me, that says to me that both of them are playing lists which are capable of very heavy alpha strikes. You've got Achilles on one side and a Sphinx on the other side. And if you look at this terrain, the deployment zones aren't very well protected. So you've got some fairly beefy buildings through the middle, but when you look at the deployment zones, there's a little bit of scattered terrain here and there, and I feel like even though there's a massive advantage in going second in terms of the scoring, it becomes a little bit too much of a liability if you go outright and take second turn, because you're worried about Achilles on the other side or the Sphinx on the other side coming through and crushing you. And those are the kinds of models you can expect in a limited insertion kind of scenario. So I don't hate these choices, although personally, if I was at a tournament where I knew that I'd be playing Supremacy and other missions where second turn scoring is really powerful, I would have tried to put together a limited insertion list that can actually cater to that and defend with a lot of hidden deployment and stuff like that. Okay, so we got the Onyx around this side here. Obviously, you can put the Sphinx and the Nocta for hidden deployment. Makes sense. What they're doing here is they're recreating the actual footage of the game in their studio with their painted miniatures to show you what's what. So I don't know if it's perfectly accurate with their representation of what happened in the game, but looking at these photos, it seems like a lot of the models in the deployment zone don't really have a total cover. So you move up the board a little bit and you can see them and shoot them straight away, which I find is a little bit of a criticism of this table. I'd like it a bit more if some of the bigger buildings were a little bit closer to the deployment zones to allow for a bit more total cover. Naga mine layer. Okay, so I wasn't wrong. He does have a Naga mine layer with the mine. Some people love mine layers, others don't. I feel like they become a little bit obvious in this sort of setup, because your opponent knows that you're playing limited insertion. When they see those two camo markers, they can count the number of models elsewhere in the table and deduce that you have a mine layer. And when you look at the position of both camo markers, it's kind of easy to guess which one's the actual mine. So I don't find the mine layer that threatening. On the other hand, if it is another killer hacker or an assault hacker, that's a bit more useful against other things in a limited insertion environment. You know that you'll be up against hackable stuff, so I would have preferred to see like an assault hacker there. But it is what it is. That's what he's gone for. So spread them out. I don't know which models have prone tokens next to them, but a lot of the models in this game can't go prone because they're remotes. You can see the live audience there. Nice little handshake. So Onyx having to go first, so need to cause a little bit of damage. It's important that, you know, the Alpha Strike actually does a fair bit. Otherwise, Aleph can, you know, easily put Achilles in the right zones and get the lion's share of the objective points. Otis has 8 regular orders because, yeah, the Sphinx and the Nocta for hidden deployment. That makes sense. You can see them counted up there. Just going to turn up the audio a bit. So, I want you guys to pay attention to the fact that he's got the fire team moving out. The Spitfire is the team leader, and he moves the fire team out before he puts assisted fire onto any of the Unijons. He does have a Nexus hacker there. Unfortunately, I believe the Nexus hacker... No, the Nexus hacker is not part of the link team. So if he had a repeater nearby, he could have used his Nexus in this corner of the table to put assisted fire on the Spitfire first. So a left player comes out and fires back with the post-human Mark II sniper, and the Spitfire is having to shoot back at that. Spitfire's got to be in the correct range. Ballistic skill 14, so he needs 8s on 5 dice. I just want you guys to appreciate that that could have been 11s on 5 dice, not 8s. And he could have also had shock rounds on his Spitfire, which would have negated the NWI of the post-human. Unfortunately, the left player obviously gets unlucky here. But I feel like we've already seen our first mistake. If he's going to bother moving up the link team, should have put assisted fire on there first for the obvious argument I just mentioned. I would have thought that he would have gone out with the Sphinx first and tried to cause damage with the maximum 10 orders and just move carefully with Unijons into the middle of the table a little bit after that, you know, had happened. But he got lucky. Now what he's able to do is he's able to move the entire Link team out into that quadrant. And being the player taking the first turn is just going to be, you know, tying up the 2 quadrants on his side of the table first, right? All right, we've got Kurnow as well. Kurnow's the only member of the fire team that can go prone. And with this table set up, it's actually quite hard to find any total cover. Oh, he's throwing a pitcher. So this is one of the advantages of Kurnow. He knows that one of the camo markers is likely to be a Naga killer hacker. But of course, he can't hack the Naga until it comes out of camo. We're going to see later that there's going to be a bit of cyber war, but again, there's no deflector in the Link team. So Kurnow by himself can use Maestro, he can use Sucker Punch, can use Red Rum. But yeah, it'd be much better if you have a deflector. Okay, so he's activating the Sphinx now on the left flank. They didn't tell us which models were placed as reserve models, but one would hope that the Sphinx was placed as a reserve trooper. Either that or the Noctifier, to be honest. So you can see that the Sphinx makes a single short skill move, immediately comes into line of fire of the post-human engineer. And this is surprising to me. Like, you've got a high-level game where it only takes one move for them to see your model. Surely there could have been other places in the deployment zone where you could have put it prone and actually kept it in total cover much more effectively. So she luckily survives the Sphinx's onslaught. The Sphinx can keep going though, so he's moving over here. Another thing you guys may have noticed is in the real game, the Onyx player hasn't painted any of his models. My question is whether he actually even had a line of sight markings. I mean, if you look at the image here, at the top of the screen, the Sphinx is just on a pure base. The photo resolution isn't really that high, so I can't tell. But if I was in the grand finals of an Interplanetario and my opponent had models that weren't painted, you know, I would hope that they at least have... Actually, I saw it. There's a little dot on the side of his face, so he does have line of sight markings. But yeah, paint your models, dude. He's going after the Mark V with the twin SMGs now, which seems to be surviving. The commentators can't believe it. He's gutsing back into cover. So Sphinx has climbing plus. This is a good table for a Sphinx because the buildings don't take too long to ascend. But once you get on top of the flat buildings, you can see them. I'm just going to go back a couple of frames there. They're showing the position of the left models relative. Okay, let's just pause that. Wait for it to come back into resolution. Pause. Okay. So that's where he deployed Eudoros and the proxy. I'm a little bit gobsmacked by that, really. You see these stairs next to where Eudoros is. Couldn't he have put Eudoros on the top stair, prone, so that he at least gets cover from the stairwell against a model like the Sphinx that can come around this side? And this engineer, if he's taken the engineer in the list purely to take Achilles out of isolated state, for example, shouldn't he have deployed that model a bit closer to Achilles and preferably in total cover? It seems a bit weird to me. And also, these flowers here, these plants, I don't really know how they're going to be playing true line of sight, but I should hope at least that this model goes prone next to it. Maybe in their recreation of the actual game, they just didn't use any markers because it would look uglier. I'm not really sure. But, I mean, this is a dream scenario for the Sphinx. You're early into the game. You've got the opportunity to remove a couple of important orders from the other guy, and he's just going to be down a couple of orders for the rest of the game. Comes to the line of sight of the Naga mine layer, who doesn't react for obvious reasons. But this is just a really good opening situation for the Onyx player. Not because the Onyx player is doing anything particularly clever. It's just because his opponent's deployment leaves a lot to be desired, in my opinion, as far as I can tell. Getting really lucky though, so the left player seems to be passing a lot of armor saves. Sphinx seems to be missing a fair bit, and not a lot of damage done. Eudoros can throw back with an Eclipse Grenade. So just looking at it, obviously Eudoros has got the ODD to help him, and Eclipse Grenade going off in a 16. But when you're up against a Sphinx, you don't really want to sort of take that beating, that potential beating, shall we say. So just retreats. This is the smart thing to do. You don't want to leave the Sphinx on the other guy's side of the table. Even though it is supremacy, what you want to do is you want to have the 100-point Sphinx on your side in the quadrant and your Unidrons on the other side, which is what he's doing, just to even it up and then hopefully win in the attrition game later and just bully your opponent out of the zones later. Commentators explaining how unlucky the Onyx player is. He's already taken a wound, hasn't really killed much on that side of the table. Okay, there's a flash pulse as well. This must have been on one of the bots further back. Or against the proxy. I think the proxy is a forward observer. I'm just going to look that up real quick while the game's going on. Where's the proxy Mark 5? I've got a screen open next to me here where I'm just checking it. Sphinx definitely not that effective this turn, guys. He is a forward. He is a forward observer. Yep. So he's got to camouflage the Sphinx, which makes sense with his last order there, just because he doesn't really want to get attacked in close combat. He wants to slow down the opponent's opportunity to come and kill him. Okay, so a left turn 1. Gonna try and deal with the material a little bit, but also look for opportunities to pick up a point from this the Supremacy mission. So Eudorus already going into a line of fire of the Q drone, which again, this is where Eudorus by himself, it's just a little bit, it's a bit risky, because your Q drone's firing on 4 dice, Eudorus on 3 dice, if he uses his Mark 12. If he only throws his Eclipse Grenade, it's pretty easy from just whiff the roll and take a hit from the Q drone. We have a Naga, and the commentators are explaining this is a really risky roll here. I want to pause this for a sec. So he's bringing his Naga out of camo state to do a red rum onto Kurnow through the repeater, right? So Kurnow ignores the surprise attack because he's in a link team. And the red rum is going to reduce Kurnow's willpower by 3. So I think it takes him down to a 10. I'll just quickly look up the actual details on that. The thing is, I mean, had there been a deflector in that link team, it becomes a totally different matter. So Kurnow's willpower 14. I believe the Naga is as well. So Kurnow, 1 dice back on an 11. The Naga is going to be doing 2 dice, also on 11 because he's using Sucker Punch. When I first saw this bat rep, I was like, well, why doesn't he use Maestro? Because Maestro is going to give Kurnow +3. Well, it's probably because Maestro can only put the Naga into dogged state. But if he does that, then he's going to die at the end of the turn anyway, because Maestro doesn't inflict wounds, it just puts you into the unconscious state, and that's replaced by dogged in this particular case. I don't know, I think I probably would have been tempted to use Maestro just because it's more important to win the face-to-face roll and prevent your opponent from using their orders efficiently. Sucker Punch apparently does have shock though, so there is the advantage to that, getting rid of the dogged effect, but like the commentators are saying, this is a really, really risky play. So Kurnow is the one that gets the critical hit, and yeah. Wait a sec, also fails the BTS roll? Is it double action or something? I should be checking the hacking programs chart. Sucker Punch is a double trouble special ammo, loss of 1 wound. It doesn't say that it's shock, though. Am I looking at the wrong thing here, or have they just made a mistake? So, -3 to your opponent. Let's just pause this. I'm looking at Army 6, Sucker Punch. Hacking area, double trouble special ammo, loss of 1 wound, / structure point. So he's rolled a crit. That gets through the first one. Oh, okay, so he rolls a crit, that gets through the first wound, and then the second wound, he fails the BTS save, so that's why he's died. So the players did it correctly, it's just that the commentators mentioning shock were a little bit off the mark there. Okay, so Eudorus again moving forward, using the Eclipse Grenade to cover his advance. He's trying not to get shot at by the Q drone, which is sort of covering the angle to come around to where the Sphinx is. So spending a few orders, just getting him into position. This is the reenactment we're watching right here. Right next to the Naga and the mine. So Eudorus gets through. Then he leaves the smoke template, quite crucially. Comes into line of sight of the Q drone. Probably hoping that there's no Noctifer, but of course there is a Noctifer. Onyx player going into his case, pulling out the Noctifer model. The fact that there's the sniper tower in the deployment zone, again, this is a very Corvus Belli thing. You know, it's quite common with them to have the height advantage in a deployment zone, even though it's very powerful. So, looks like the smoke grenade beats all the shots from the Q drone, which is quite lucky, actually. And then the Noctifer rolls a crit, which totally nukes Eudoros, as you can see there. So, yeah, Eudoros deserves it. I mean, this is just, it's not really that lucky for the Onyx player. It's just a really bad position for Eudoros to get himself into. He's enduring a face-to-face roll with a Q drone and a Noctifer at the same time, and trying to throw a grenade. You know, he's throwing a grenade on a 16, but that can so easily go wrong. If he rolls above a 16, or if he rolls, you know, too low, it's not really going to work. So he brings in Achilles, he's got some orders left, and the plan is to go after the Noctifer with Achilles. And again, this is still risky. Achilles can make it work, though, because Achilles will get into the correct range band. It's probably going to be really low dice needed for the Noctifer. So Noctifer's probably better off dodging, and Achilles shooting and probably hitting on 10s. So the Noctifer attempted to shoot back instead of dodge. So that's high risk, high reward, really. If he nukes Achilles, does some damage, that's obviously brilliant, but keeping the Noctifer alive is quite important, because you're going to need the orders later on in Supremacy to get your models into the zones correctly. So Achilles actually has to try again, has to do it over 2 rounds, especially because of Dogged. I'm not too sure if Dogged was activated there, but the point is that he would have to get through 2 wounds to completely remove the Noctifer before the end of the turn. Onyx player is smiling in relief. And Achilles is on the central building behind the chopper. Okay. They're just having a look to see whether you can see the bat droid. Taking on a link team like that is pretty annoying. Okay, so Kernau gets a hit. 3 hits against Kernau. So this should kill him. Wow, so the armor saves are all passed. That's incredible. Okay. So a lot of luck going in the way of the Onyx player, as far as I can tell, if I'm following the game correctly. This is a situation where, after losing Eudoros, Achilles is really the only thing in your army that can do a lot of work. And with Achilles' position right in the middle of the table, he's going to be stuck there by the end of the turn. You've got hacking nearby, you've got the Sphinx which can come up after him. He still hasn't killed the Noctifer, so he's going back at it again, as they say. It's just such a bad situation to be in as a left player. You can see when I play Aleph in my battle reports, obviously, you know, it's not limited insertion, but when you can play Aleph within the context of a 15 order list, and he gets the Noctifer by the looks, going for a coordinated order. In my lists, I tend to run the Dakini HMG, so I've actually got something with range. I mean, if you look at the Aleph player's list, he's got nothing that actually shoots above a you know, 24-inch range bands effectively, except for the Mark II proxy sniper, which is more of a reactive piece. I play a Dakini HMG and also a couple of Krakots to still have things which can go out and get some kills if Achilles is not available. So like a lot of games of Supremacy, it's just tied up after 1 game round. He's got Achilles in one quadrant, he's got, I believe, his proxy in the other quadrant. It's pretty easy to tie it up like that as the player going second, but you can't really commit to moving Achilles all the way to the other side of the board, just for the sake of 1 objective point, because then you'll lose him. Achilles is going to be impetuous in the next turn as well. Okay, so the marker, so the Sphinx marker goes so it can see the Naga mine layer, and Achilles has line of fire as well. Delays, so a delay from Achilles. Okay, stop. So the Naga camo marker reveals itself with a discover roll against the Sphinx. Surely that is a mistake. Like, surely that is a bad play. Let me explain why. So the Naga camo marker doesn't need to reveal. When you are a marker, you can delay. And what happens there is that if the Sphinx puts all of the shots into Achilles, the Naga can just stay there undiscovered or have a free shot against the Sphinx if it wants to, right? So Achilles is delaying. Achilles is going to be able to shoot back. Achilles could also dodge. That'd be fine. But he's going for a discover with the Naga, which reveals him, allows the Sphinx to shoot him either this order or the next order without having to discover him first. If the Naga stays where it is without revealing, and the Sphinx goes after Achilles and drives him into cover, and then goes after the Naga Mine Layer, there's a possibility of the Naga Mine Layer actually not being discovered and not dying because the Sphinx can't really do anything. I mean, I guess the Sphinx could come in later and do an intuitive flamethrower, but it's going to take the Onyx player more and more orders. With the discover roll, though, I mean, you're discovering on something like a 9 or an 8 even. It's whip 14 with no range band, nothing, no modifiers, I believe, -6 for TO camo. So you could even just fail that discover completely. But yeah, I think this is a terrible play by the left player, going for that discover, because you just get a free hit on you by the Sphinx, or the Sphinx can just ignore you at this point. I'm kind of dumbfounded by that. The Naga is obliterated, so even though it's got dogged, it takes 2 wounds there. That's pretty unfortunate. Achilles fails the dodge as well. 1 impact. I think he's past the armor save. No, he suffers 1 wound. Fair enough. Okay. Achilles continuing to dodge. I'm not too sure what happened there. So he's going after the Proxy Mark 5. Again, the Proxy Mark 5, I think has an EM grenade. Well, that's pretty dangerous. It's still going to be a face-to-face roll, though, against the Sphinx. Just not really optimal. Proxy Mark 5 has an EM grenade. Well, that actually could be really filthy if it hits the Sphinx, but I'm not clear on what the outcome of that actually was. I mean, it's going to be hitting on, what's BS 13 plus 3, no, physical 11, sorry, 14. That'll be hitting on an 8, though, against TO camo, so it's pretty easy for the Sphinx to beat him. Looks like he's moving his models around, Doctor. Just really suffocating the left player at this point. Okay, so they're trying to box Achilles in. If Achilles dies, then the game's basically over. Okay, so they've built the train in such a way that it has a ground elevator, and it can be used to move one of the Unidrons and Link Team up there. This is not a bad play, because if the Unidron die, it's not too big a deal. But he's in a 5-man link, so he's gonna... assuming that Kurnow survived earlier, that is. So he's going to be firing 3 dice, hitting on, I think, 11s on 3 dice. Achilles, for some reason, not wanting to shoot back with the Spitfire. He wants to dodge closer. So Achilles, for some reason, I don't know why he's doing this, but he dodges closer to the Unidron, succeeds, and now he's in range of the repeater. So they go to hack him. Hacking is unsuccessful. I'm seeing some moves in this game that are either not very good plays, or the commentary is not really giving us all the information, or maybe I'm just missing things. That's how it feels at the moment. Alright, so Achilles' position has been shifted around a little bit, allowing the Sphinx to move in a little bit closer, where Achilles can't immediately shoot him, but now he comes to the line of sight, and continuing to go for him. Both the Sphinx and Achilles have taken damage. Okay, that's another wound to Achilles, so he should have 1 left. Yeah. And he's able to use the guts check to continue to get out of line of sight. And that puts it back onto a left turn too. He probably doesn't have that many orders left. He's lost the post-human completely, I believe. He's lost Eudorus. Yeah, Achilles is impetuous, but he can cancel that. And they're just explaining that he doesn't want to use Impetus because he's hackable right now. So he's got the movement officer. He's got to be careful about moving out with that because that's the chain of command model. And if he loses both that and Achilles, then there's nothing else he could do because he's been lost lieutenant. I wasn't clear on whether he was playing the Myrmidon with the combi rifle, the officer with the combi rifle, or the shotgun. Shooting at Plasma Garbine activates Dogged. Fair enough. That was 2 dice he rolled. So it seems like maybe it's the shotgun version that he's using. The Link team is still relatively intact, as far as I can tell, but I can't tell that well. So shooting the Unitron and also the pitcher, so that should be 1 dice on each if it is a boarding shotgun. And then that'll free up Achilles because Achilles won't be in the hacking area because the hacker is on the top right of the photo of the footage, way away. So it's only the repeater that's getting that. Looks like he does take out a Unitron. They are quite annoying to kill because of Dogged, but he does get a crit on the pitcher, it says there. Okay. So that's a little bit of a comeback. It's still going to be hard. Now they're doing a bit of filler talk about the Interplanetario in general. Aristide tournament was going on there as well. So Myrmidon continuing to be relied on. Myrmidon officer. They're just checking to see if it will get line of sight if it comes around to that point. He's only got a couple orders left, it says. Plus lieutenant order. 3 command tokens. He's just finishing off the Batroids there. I'm not even sure if there was a plasma sniper amongst those Batroids. I think this is where he's going to try going for the objective as well, to try and pick up a point, which would potentially give him the tiebreaker. If the Onyx player is unsuccessful in picking up points from the quadrants later on. So we've got one more here from Achilles. He looks at going back behind the helicopter. Okay, alright. I just want to pause this. I think this is a very important moment in the game. For a reason that doesn't relate to the specific game. So the Aleph player is activating Achilles, moving him back, and the Onyx player is telling him that if he does that, the Sphinx will have line of sight. So watch what happens next. So they're just realizing that. Both players having a conversation about it. He's not sure if he wants to. He changes his mind. He's now going for a coordinated order. So he ends up not doing that. There's a lot of talk on the forums about, play by intent versus play it as it lies. And there's actually a camp of people within the infiNity community who say that the correct thing to do is just to declare the trajectory, the direction the model's moving in. Tell your opponent how, many inches you're moving, and then that gets resolved. Then after that, you go in and figure out whether there are any AROs. So there is a camp of people within the community that would say here that Achilles needs to move behind the chopper, and then discovers that the Sphinx is going to shoot at him, and just has to suck it up and take that. What we're seeing here is that at the Interplanetario, which is Corvus Belli's flagship tournament, the 2 players who are in the final, the players who are regarded as some of the better players, are playing basically the way that the rest of us play in most of the community, and that is by having a conversation about it, and having a little bit of a take back if you find that there was a arrow you didn't realize existed, and generally playing by intent, the way that we usually think of it. I mean, you only see part of that, but you see enough of it to infer that that's really how it is done. We're not seeing a situation where Achilles is just declaring that he intends to come around, you know, a pie slice just enough to be able to see one model but not the other. We're not seeing that being played out here specifically, but we are seeing a situation where the players aren't having to take up tons of time checking every single line of sight before they declare what they're doing, because they know that there's no need for that so long as both players have a conversation about, you know, what's out there, and put their hand up and actually voluntarily say that lines of sight will exist before the opponent has to go and check for them. I think that's really, really important. So there's a coordinated order now. I think this is with his last order. Just getting models into better positions to end the turn. The Unidrons on Dog and Salt will be cleared out at the end of the turn. Achilles is the obviously the spearhead, so that's why he gets a couple of shots. Both shots saved. And then there's a Lieutenant order. Alright, cool, so unfortunately the Unidron gets a shot because it's still dogged, but it's Achilles versus the Sphinx. We're expecting Achilles to win this because he's got more dice in the active turn. Oh. Why is it only one shot? Is this still a coordinated order? Are they still resolving that? I thought... Maybe he split his burst. I'm not really following what's going on. So he's finally cleared out the Unidron. That's the end of game round 2, though. You can see that he's barely holding on to it. If we just pause this. So Achilles is just, you know, on the line between the left and right quadrant. He's obviously taking the right quadrant because his Flash Pulse bot and Danaves and his other proxy back here aren't in the zone, and then the Myrmidon Officer's taking the other zone, but he's only got about 5 or 6 orders left. Whereas the combined player has got plenty of models in the zones still. And he doesn't really want to push forward into one of the enemy zones with, say, his Myrmidon or whatever, because he leaves himself with nothing in the zone there. So because he's got so few models, even though he's got the second turn advantage, he's not really able to capitalize on it. They're saying it's 3-2 in favor of left, just because the console was collected. Apparently, I didn't really see where that happened, but apparently it was. But the thing is that advantage can be negated later by Intelcom or by the Onyx player maybe picking up one of his own consoles. Alright, so the Sphinx goes up against him. He doesn't get cover anymore, they're realizing, because he's impetuous. He had Frenzy previously. I think he's down to his last wound. Sphinx just continuing to brutalize him. Should be the end. He's gone. I believe that this is the last Onyx turn. So he's got to end the game with the Sphinx in one of his enemy zones and keep his 2 zones safe. And he may need to do something about the objective situation, although they are playing with Intelcom, so that will negate the button. But if the left player is able to press another one, then he might be able to draw it up. Easily able to go after the Myrmidon Officer now, who, again, I believe he has a boarding shotgun, so with the Sphinx's mobility, it's not hard to just track him down, so basically, game should be in the bag for Onyx. I mean, you put Aleph into Lost Lieutenant by killing Achilles and the Myrmidon Officer, and when the Aleph player's only got a couple of orders left to move out, it's going to be very hard to go up and press another objective. So at this point, I think the best you can do as the Aleph player is to try and go for a draw. Yeah, you can see he's even getting his Q drone in a position to make it even harder, making sure that he's going to keep the quadrants safe. It's cool how they've got two cameras going for this. Finish the activation in the further quadrant from his deployment, that's correct. Myrmidon can't get cover from that. Oh, she's throwing smoke. That's a great play. Critical hit. Okay, that seals it. Throwing smoke would be great there because that means he won't be in Lost Lieutenant and has the opportunity to try and move out and maybe press another button or move into an enemy zone at the end. Lieutenant Order was actually the Nexus hacker. There were no other models in the army that could have been the Lieutenant anyway, so it's good that he had his Lieutenant safe in the corner there. Pretty good deployment zone for hiding a Lieutenant, to be honest. Right now, for having another reaction shot. Yes, that's correct. So they're right. There are no more turns for the Onyx player. Doesn't matter if his Lieutenant dies. They just want another combi rifle just to make it harder. So it's basically over. He's in a position where, you know, the Sphinx has only taken a wound. He's in Lost Lieutenant. He's got the Proxy Engineer with a combi rifle, but that's just not going to be able to win any face-to-face rolls against any of the Onyx models. He's not going to be able to fix the zone situation. So he has to try and go out and actually press one of the buttons with the Proxy Engineer. But as you can see, he's got like 2 command tokens, 4 regular orders spread around the table. Not really looking very good. Oh, there's a flash pulse going off as well. Can we dare to say that Usura would be able to rise the Roman Empire again? Indeed. Give him 1 Coca-Cola, 2 donuts, and 250 years and he'll do it. Spanish humor right there. Post-human proxy Mark 1 is advancing. Again, early in the bat rep, they said that it's a engineer. I'm surprised it's not a doctor. I really feel like it's more important to be able to revive Achilles from being unconscious than it is to remove the isolator state from him. Although, now that I think about it, there's a pretty strong argument for banking on that instead. Because it's quite hard to get 3 wounds off Achilles, whereas it's a lot easier to isolate him. Maybe that's the reasoning. So they're talking about the fact that Intelcom basically can negate the fact that one of your specialists has pressed one of the buttons. The Intelcom will cause the specialist to no longer count as a specialist. Therefore, the button will no longer count as being captured or pressed. So the left player will have picked up no points other than the evenly matched point at the end of the first and second game rounds where both players get a point. So the left player will never have done anything that got him ahead in objective points, whereas at the end of the game, the Onyx player will have secured more quadrants than the left player, so it should be a victory by a margin of 1 point. Although I would have thought it would be a draw if the engineer actually makes it to the objective here and presses the button. He's activating the proxy console to reach the console. So maybe he doesn't have enough orders to reach it before he gets shot. Maybe that's what they're talking about. Yeah, the Q drone and the Sphinx. He's kind of going to try and dodge it. I'm pretty sure the reenactment is not right, because if the proxy has enough speed to make it there, she ignores the shots and just tries to pass the whip check, right? Because if that had been the case, then you have picked up 2 consoles by the end of the game. Intelcom can only remove 1 of them, and you're still up a point, and that would have made the game a draw, I think. That little marker in the reenactment version of the footage might not actually be the objective, though. I mean, obviously the proxy is going to be wrecked here, but I just don't understand why the proxy wasn't able to just walk to the objective and try and press the button. That doesn't seem too clear to me from the bat rep. Cool. I must say I didn't really like the left player's army list, whereas the Onyx player's army list, the only criticism I would make is that he doesn't have the 10 bot there and the Onyx, the Unidron Link team, right? So that would be a criticism from me, from the Onyx player. With the Aleph player, I feel like Eudorus probably doesn't need to be in there. He could surely take something better than that. I would have preferred a Sophitect instead of a Proxy Engineer, because then you get the healing as well as the engineering, so to speak. I didn't like the Aleph player's decision to pick the table side, and then, even after picking the table side, put models in places where they would not get total cover from, you know, an attacking Alpha Striking Rambo. I didn't like that. I also felt like the Discover from the Naga was a bit of a mistake, and I probably wouldn't have attempted to hack Kernel with my Naga Killer Hacker either. So those were a few mistakes there. Putting Achilles in the middle of the table, not the worst idea, just because you need him to be there capturing zones, and he had a pretty good spot on top of that building. But yeah, I didn't feel like it was a really particularly amazing game. If I had to rate this game on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1's a really, you know, non-eventful game that's not really interesting and kind of a pathetic game, compared to, for example, a 10 being a game that's really amazing and close and full of really great plays, I'd probably rate this game as like a 4, to be blunt. Wasn't particularly impressed with it. Both players, I think, were competent. Like, they struck me as the kind of players that were capable of winning an event, and both lists definitely had the capacity there to do it. I just felt like there was a bit of disparity between how I usually understand how infiNity's played well and what they were doing. But there may have been things that I missed. There may have been some ideas behind what they're trying to doing that I just didn't get. That as a player, I just failed to understand them. It may also have been the case that the commentary of the game was inaccurate in some spots, and that the little footage of reenactment didn't match up correctly with what actually was on the field at the time. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed going through it with me anyway, and learned a little bit from it. Maybe we'll do this again next year with the next Interplanetario.